Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
He is always so kind to us, isn't he, John?
He is, even when Brad has to do a little re-rack.
Yes.
You know, Brad, for the right price, you could get a re-rack done by some plastic surgeons right here in St. Louis.
I bet you I could. I need some surgery on my eyes. I'd do that before I do the plastic surgery. Well, good morning to you, John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T.
Good morning to you, Brad.
The reason I spell C-O-M-B-E-S-T is because I'm going to talk about johncombest.com. People will be able to go there, and it's J-O-H-N, not J-O-N, J-O-H-N, C-O-M-B-E-S-T.com. He's the guy that for 2+ decades, every single day, he gets up early in the morning and he chronicles all the important news stories across the state of Missouri on his website. And once again, nothing fancy, no graphics, no crazy HTML code that's got dancing bears or anything, stuff like that. No video, no nothing. It looks like Web 1.0, and I'm not insulting you. It's just very basic, and it's got all the links, and you can find out all the stories. And we start off the show every morning by giving John the ability to tell us the top 3 stories in his opinion.
Number 3 today is a story that we have never talked about on this show, Brad, and it is the Missouri Net had the director of the Missouri Poison Center on yesterday to talk about a rash of overdose cases and poisoning cases that they have seen. What substance do you think causes that, Brad?
Shoe polish.
That's a good guess. And for men like you and I of a different era who take great pride in our footwear, you would think that there would be some. But no. The answer is the diabetes drug Ozempic.
Really? I mean, are these people that have been prescribed for it and decide they're going to lose weight even quicker and take more of it? Is that what it is?
Yeah, surprisingly, it is not. And there have been cases of fake Ozempic throughout the world. So for folks who don't know, Ozempic is a drug that's diagnosed illegally for technically for diabetes, I believe, is why it was introduced. And it's part of a family of drugs called, I'll get the name wrong, but I did a little research on it last night. I'll pronounce it wrong, so I'm not even going to try. But folks are using this drug recreationally to help them lose weight, to accelerate weight loss.
Well,
if you turn on a television station, the gentleman from the Missouri Net mentioned this. If you turn on a TV at any given point, you will probably see an ad for Ozempic. And folks, the woman from the poison control group pointed out that it's not so much that folks are using artificial drugs or imposter synthetic drugs, but it's this, they're just getting the dosage wrong because they're acquiring this in means other than a doctor. And it can cause, so there are a few cases globally where it has allegedly caused death, but in most cases it just causes extreme abdominal pain. You're really messing with your gastrointestinal tract when you do this. And by the way, I would also point out, I looked this up last night, Brad, the drug maker who makes it, who is Novo Nordisk, their stock is up 65% in the last year.
Well, yeah. Plus they're
because it's wildly popular.
Plus, they're raising the price on it, I heard. But now, hold on. Let me go back a minute. You said that isn't it? It's essentially intended as a diabetes drug, but it's
correct.
It's off-label, isn't that what they call it? Off-label.
Yeah, the off-label application or off-label uses, I should say.
Right, and the doctors prescribe it if you have obesity. Matter of fact, when you're talking about ads on TV, you're talking about not necessarily the drug ads. Aren't you talking about the doctors who are saying, "Hey, come to my clinic and I'll give you."
That's exactly right. Yeah, right. because it's become wildly popular. And as you mentioned, Brad, I believe there was a shortage. So of course, if you have, whether the shortage is intended by the drug maker or not, to raise prices, Yeah, so you've seen, I believe, a shortage of it. We've read stories, obviously, about a shortage of it. And then, of course, you can, it's just like any other drug. If you know somebody who's got a prescription for the right price, you can get your hands on it.
That's so the idea being is, and I'm not exactly sure when you're saying they're overdosing, is it because they think if they take more of it, they're going to lose weight quicker? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think you've seen that with however many supplements you have, whether it was weight loss supplements in the 1990s. Folks will see, in the old days, you would see a thing that says take 2 of these twice a day. And so folks that really wanted to accelerate their weight loss might take 4 caplets twice a day because they think they're going to get greater results by increasing the dosage.
Oh, man, I've never been. I mean, even legal drugs. If the doctor says take 3 of these a day, I take 3 of them. I don't take 4 or 5 or 6. You know what I'm saying?
Right. You would think that dosage is pretty well dialed in. You would think that the experts would know.
And if it's
but this
not,
is like anything else. And the joy of this product, as I understand it, is unlike any other weight loss, for example, exercise or moderation in food consumption, you can take Ozempic and lose weight.
Yeah,
it doesn't require you to get up off the couch.
Right. I've heard people lose a pound a day. I mean, easily a pound a day. But I don't know. There's got to be, when you hear about stuff like this, you almost say, okay, the other shoe's going to drop, and maybe in a year they'll come out and say that your toes are going to fall off or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Then it also depends on how much faith you have in the long-term effects of pharmaceutical drugs.
Well,
I mean, now in the defense of this company, Brad, it's not like a COVID vaccine where they just say, hey, trust me, we have no long-term studies, but just trust us.
Right. You won't get COVID. You won't pass it on to anybody else, right? All the things we were told, which turned out to not be true, but that's a whole other story.
So that's the Ozempic story, and I think that's interesting. Just you and I haven't talked about that before, and we hear so much, as we should, about fentanyl and the dangers of fentanyl. And, of course, it's way more deadly than an Ozempic, but I bet everyone listening either knows somebody who has taken Ozempic or somebody who's tried to get their hands on it.
Crazy stuff. Number 2.
Number 2 is Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman appeared on Mark Reardon's show on 97.1 FM and gave an alternative perspective to the Freedom Caucus. And she was asked about the Freedom Caucus and the initiative petition push and things of this nature. And she said, she was asked directly by Reardon, why aren't you a member of the Freedom Caucus? And her answer, to paraphrase, is that she went to Jefferson City to represent her constituents and the policies she's interested in. And she's interested in working with anybody on any ideological faction or any party that's willing to advance legislation. And to paraphrase here, she's not interested in joining any one team. That's the way I interpreted it, to get legislation passed.
How do you feel about that?
I think that it makes sense for Mary Elizabeth Coleman.
Now,
I think that the opportunity cost, I think you do the calculus of, if you're any given senator, if you're Travis Fitzwater or you're Mary Elizabeth Coleman or anyone, you look at the calculus of what do you gain by being a part of this faction? And really, Brad, Mary Elizabeth pointed out the fact that her voting record, if you look at, for example, an Americans for Prosperity voting scorecard, she is indeed ranked more conservative than some members of the Freedom Caucus. So she wouldn't need to wear a Freedom Caucus label, in other words, to bolster her conservative bona fides.
Well, I just, you and I can talk about this till the cows come home, but part of this bothers me, the fact that the Democrats have this united front, that a Democrat's a Democrat, and the Republicans seems like they always split in these little factions, you know what I mean? And nothing ever gets done. I mean,
they do. You're right, in the majority. And as I always point out, Brad, when Democrats were in the majority 30 years ago, they had the same problem. Republicans were unified because they were in the minority. And to use your phrase, Brad, a Republican was a Republican was a Republican. And back then, 30 years ago, Democrats in Jefferson City or in D.C., when Tip O'Neill led the House, he had a number of Democratic factions that would split off as well.
It was interesting. I was listening to a show the other day. I didn't talk about this today. It's Thursday. I think this was Monday or Tuesday. And I heard someone, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I heard someone give almost the exact same explanation of their frustration with the political system that I gave, that you see these people on the floor of the House in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, be it state, federal, the whole bit, and they're going after it. And, they're like, vigorously debating each other. And, you're the kind sir from Missouri, you're full of bull. They yell at each other and the whole bit. And then it's 6 o'clock and everything shuts down, and these two dudes are at the bar together, slapping each other on the back. Boy, didn't we do great in Congress today? You know what I'm saying? It's kabuki.
Yeah, and so whether that's a good or bad thing probably depends on which faction you're in.
Well, I don't know. I think,
and as the great Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea says, it's all a work, brother.
You and your wrestling. Okay.
It's all a work. And I would point out, by the way, too, Brad, this is important, from the Reardon and Coleman discussion, they brought up something that you were correct about yesterday as it relates to concurrent majorities. Concurrent majorities can mean a majority of congressional districts, or to your point yesterday, Brad, it could mean a majority of state legislative districts.
That's what
state rep or state senate. You brought that up yesterday. I thought you were wrong, and you were indeed correct.
We're talking about the initiative, initiative
petition process. Correct.
Initiative petition process, which essentially is the way that you can get a law changed in the state of Missouri by essentially changing the Constitution. You bypass the legislature, you bypass the Senate and the House of Representatives.
That's right. So you were right about that. And one more thing, of course, Brad, because this was another great interview by St. Louis's best interviewer, Mark Reardon.
He's
and
the
as
best.
Brad learned a couple weeks ago, you do not compliment Mark Reardon and tell him he is the best in St. Louis, because he will come back and tell you he does not care what people think, and he does not care about your opinion. So whatever you do, if you listen to this, and the link is on johncombest.com today, with timestamps, do not compliment Mark Reardon on his work.
Yeah, I see. You and I did a whole segment on him because of the fact that he went off on Mark McCluskey, and he essentially said he was a non-entity or a non-factor or something like that. And my point was, let the people decide. And my point was, go back to 2016 and it's interesting because you go back in history with Mark Reardon in 2016 when Trump came down on the escalator, he rolled his eyes. Oh my God, this is just a publicity stunt. And he was anti-Trump for a long time. And he admits now that was a mistake and he did the wrong thing. But my point being is that he would not interview Mark McCluskey because he said Mark McCluskey was not a serious candidate. When I say, and we've talked to Mark a couple times, love or hate the guy put in put in tremendous effort. Him and his wife visited every single county in the state of Missouri. They talked about they bought an SUV, they pulled a trailer behind it, and they bought an SUV brand new, had no miles on the clock when they bought it, and I think he said by the time the election was over, it had like 118,000 miles on it, which, when you think about that, that's doing some driving.
It is, and that's what I refer to as efforting metrics, though, Brad.
Right, but still, I get what you're saying, John, but come in, you're a sports guy, okay? I'm not anymore. I'm not a sports guy. And it's funny, right before we went on the air, the clip that we ran before about, you saying, well, Brad, you and I are Cardinals fans. I said, no, I'm not a Cardinals fan anymore.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. I was wrong about that.
And you were going like, what? You're not a Cardinals fan?
Yeah.
Okay. If you got Gary Templeton and Ozzie Smith, which one do you want? Ozzie Smith went out on the field every day and gave it 100% effort, whereas Gary Templeton went out there and some days he gave it the effort and some days he didn't. Now, you talk about your efforting. Which guy is going to be liked by most people? The guy who goes out there and gives it 100% every day.
You're right about that, but I think it's unfair to compare, say, Eric Schmidt or Billy Long or Vicky Hartzler to Gary Templeton. I get exactly what you're saying, but the challenge I have with it is when people point to their odometer and say, I put 200,000 miles on, maybe Eric Schmidt didn't or Eric Greitens didn't, but that doesn't mean that they haven't put in effort. You get what I'm saying?
Well, no, I understand what you're saying, but you're saying that like if in other words, if you got two people, well, okay, like let's say you have two people, you have two doctors who are there, you've got some serious disease and you can be cured by either of these two doctors. And the one doctor says, hey, when I was in med school, man, I went and partied every night, and man, I got blank-faced.
Yeah,
and,
I get it.
And I got drunk, and I smoked dope, and I snorted cocaine. And the other doctor is saying, when I went to medical school, I studied every night. Okay.
I choose the nerd every time.
You would? Really?
Well, actually, I'd probably look at the copay, Brad. Because I don't like to go in my pocket for anything. Like I got alligator arms. You know what I mean? Like I don't like to come out of pocket for anything.
So you take the guy who was partying every night in med school, right?
No. Well, it depends. It depends on what the copay
hold on.
is.
No, you.
By the way, can we at some point just take a minute and pay homage to the great Gary Templeton, who once gave a finger to the female crowd? It was Ladies' Day at the park, right?
Yeah, I believe it was. And
I believe it was. So speaking of giving the finger, our number one story yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, and a cast of characters, a bipartisan cast of characters, grilled, excoriated, whatever type of verb you want to use here, CEOs of social media companies, including Mark Zuckerberg. And I know we have only like a minute until we're up against break here, but in what was described as a remarkable exchange by a liberal publication called The Hill in D.C., no friend of Republicans, described it as remarkable that Josh Hawley essentially prodded CEO of Facebook, or Meta, I should say, Mark Zuckerberg, into standing up out of his chair when giving his testimony during the hearing, turned to families who say that they were victims of social media policies by these companies, and apologized to them for the pain that he caused.
And do you know what's
it was a remarkable moment.
You know what's interesting about that?
What's that?
I got emails from various friends of mine, and most of it was negative toward Hawley.
Because they thought he was badgering Zuckerberg?
Because they thought he was just grandstanding. It was a terrible thing to do to Mark Zuckerberg. And essentially
wow,
what he did
that's
was
interesting. Well, by the way, if it's February/January of 2024 and you're surprised that Josh Hawley is doing a bit of grandstanding, where have you been?
Well, no, I understand. But by the same token, I have to tell you, I've never been a big fan of Josh Hawley because I've always held it against him that when he ran for Attorney General, he said loud and proud, I'm not using this job as a stepping stone to another position. And 2 months after he was Attorney General,
he was climbing the ladder.
He was climbing the ladder.
He was climbing the no ladder man was climbing the ladder.
Right. And then the other thing is, not to say that, I need to have my palm greased, but Shelley and I went and met him at a campaign event out in St. Charles, talked to his campaign manager, explained to them we were a small station and most of the big stations got all the political bucks and we never got any. And he assured us that they would, that look at us seriously and very quiet, seriously make a political buy with us. And he did zip. Now, the crazy part of it is that his competitor at the time,
Claire McCaskill,
Claire Bear,
sent you money every week.
Yes, so she bought
and also
a ton of advertising.
To be fair to Josh Hawley here, he would have even if he shook your and Shelley's hand and he's off to the next stop. Josh Hawley didn't make the decision to not advertise.
No, I understand. No,
yeah, and I know you know that.
No,
that's
it wasn't.
Important. When you say he in that story,
it wasn't.
He was the guy on his campaign.
It wasn't Josh. It was his campaign manager.
Right. Or Brad. Or the guy that was driving him to the event that day.
No, I understand what you're saying. But when the guy who is his campaign manager, let's be honest, the campaign manager of any campaign has a lot to say with what the candidate does.
Makes a lot of the decisions. Josh doesn't get involved in the media purchasing. You're absolutely right.
It's the campaign manager who says, we need to buy more social media, or we need to buy more billboards. And by the way, yesterday I think I saw out and about on my ways of the interstate yesterday, I think I saw 4 Kehoe billboards. And I'm thinking to myself,
I bet you did. And if you go to the Missouri Ethics Commission website and you look up American Dream PAC, which is his big political action committee, and you look up the Kehoe campaign, go to expenditures, Brad, and look up how much he's paying the Drury family and others for billboards.
Oh no, they're spending some bucks.
They're spending some bucks.
Once again, I've yet to see your buddy Ashcroft or any Eigel billboards anywhere. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. Okay, we have to take a break. Let me make sure I don't screw this up. Do this right here. Do this, and we will be back.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?